This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the one-stop shop that lets you make a website of your very own to engage with your audience and then spruce it up with pretty effects and layouts and even sell your merch on there, like socks, if you're selling socks. If you've ever wanted to make a website that you can call your own, then I highly suggest following in my footsteps and giving Squarespace a try, especially if you're into making gaming content. You can even check out my fantastic new website in the description if you fancy. They've got tons of super easy templates to work off of if you need some inspiration and extremely cool ways to host your content on the website or embed any video anywhere and even remonetize it all 100% through your website on Squarespace. And stay on top of your website visits with their insightful analytics, so you know exactly how many people are visiting from where. And even better, you can try Squarespace out for free for 14 days. Then when you're ready to launch your amazing new site, you can head to squarespace.com/bandit for 10% off the first purchase. So what are you waiting for? Hey guys, it's me, Bandit. I know it's been a little while since my last upload, but things have happened. I randomly woke up in New York City, for instance, but of course you would have known that if you followed me on Instagram. But anyway, I'm back and wanted to start the year off fresh with covering Zelda, as in the princess from the series The Legend of Zelda. You may think you know all there is to know about the well-known princess who gives Toadstool a run for her money in the how many times can you be kidnapped competition, but think again. For instance, did you know that unlike the spirit of the hero, Zelda is more of a descendant than a reincarnation, and every daughter born into the original Zelda's bloodline after a certain point in the timeline was to be named Zelda, meaning technically there have been an infinite, unknowable number of Zeldas that we've never even met? Or how about the fact that at one point there were two completely different Princess Zeldas alive and in existence at the same time in the same timeline? Oh yeah, Zelda lore goes hard, and that, my friends, is the name of the game for this video. So without further ado, let us delve into explaining each iteration of Zelda that we know of in the games. Oh, and spoiler alert for the entire franchise, obviously. Since it's easier to explain in-universe lore when following the in-universe lore timeline, we're going to cover the Zelda appearances in the order they take place on the timeline, starting with the very first Zelda from Skyward Sword. This Zelda is different from every other Zelda in that she's not actually royalty. Well, not yet at least. Since the royal family exists immediately following this game and is composed of her descendants, it can be assumed that Skyward Zelda started the royal family when she and Link probably, you know, populated the surface of the earth. But anyway, it was due to the events and adventures surrounding Skyward Zelda's life that we were able to discover her true identity. And that is that she is the reincarnation of the goddess Hylia, who is probably the goddess of time, but that's a whole other theory, and therefore her bloodline is not only royal, but is literally supernatural. And yes, her supernatural blood gives her and her descendants superpowers. She's the full package, but besides her return to the surface and the founding of Hyrule, there's not much else to say about good old Skyward Zelda, so moving on. The next Zelda that pops up on the timeline is the princess from the Minish Cap. We'll call her Minish Zelda. Now, Minish Zelda serves to kind of throw a wrench in the whole Zelda's having powers due to Hylia bloodline thing, because Minish Zelda has a presumably different power flowing through her veins, according to Vati, the main enemy of the game. See, long ago, the teeny tiny little Minish people descended down to the land of regular-sized people and gave the ancient Hylians a magical power called the Light Force. This Light Force, which originated not from Hylia, but from tiny sky people, was similarly placed within the bloodline of Hyrule's princess, and is said to be a source of limitless magical power. So just to be clear, at this point in the timeline, Princess Zeldas have both goddess powers and the unlimited source of magical power called the Light Force in their bloodlines. I suppose a theory could be made that they're one and the same, but, well, maybe I'll talk more about that in another video. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Subscribe. Back to Minish Zelda though, besides the whole Light Force in her blood thing, the only other chewy piece of lore that she gives to the series would be the fact that she is the first Princess Zelda. And that's about it. The next Princess Zelda is the Zelda from Four Swords. Similarly to the previous two, she also was a childhood friend of her Link and helps Link defeat Vati once again, who tried to marry her. Yep, the next Princess Zelda is one of the most important, if not the de facto most important Zelda to the lore of the franchise, and I'm not just saying that because Ocarina of Time is my favorite game of all time. Okay, maybe I am a little bit, but seriously, she has a very fleshed out story and is also literally the reason why the timeline splits in the first place. Well, she's the reason why it splits between adult and child, that is. The Fallen timeline exists either way, but we don't explain that when using actual logic. Anyway, Ocarina Zelda, who is also the same Zelda that kind of makes an appearance in Majora's Mask, is the first Zelda Zelda, who, alongside the hero of time, we get to see both as a child and as an adult. And in both instances, she kind of sort of messes everything up despite trying her hardest to do the right thing. Hashtag relatable. I go into this in much more detail in an old video of mine I did explaining Ocarina Zelda's big mistake, but in a nutshell, as a child, she was given prophetic dreams which detailed evil coming to the world, and a boy in green being the key to saving everyone. In an attempt to do something with her visions, she tried to bring it up to her father, who apparently didn't listen to her, something that kings of Hyrule have in common with one another, apparently. Since her father lent her no ear, she took matters into her own hands when Link, the weird green forest boy from her dreams, randomly came to see her. She tells Link to get the Master Sword, which he does, which ends up putting Link to sleep for 7 years and leaving the door to the Sacred Realm and therefore the Triforce wide freaking open, allowing Ganondorf to just waltz right in and touch it with his greasy Gerudo fingers. Zelda and Impa go into hiding for 7 years, and in that time, Zelda trains hard to become an epic gender-swapped Sheikah ninja named Sheik in order to thwart Ganondorf's best efforts to find her. Anyway, once Link has awoken from his slumber 7 years later and is guided by Sheik towards the ultimate goal of awakening all the sages, Sheik reveals himself as the Princess Zelda herself, and immediately gets captured by Ganondorf, after which Link rescues her, and normally this is where a happily ever after would come into play, but not for Ocarina Zelda. See, she was so racked with guilt over the whole Link losing his childhood and the world being plunged into 7 long years of horribleness thing, since really it was kind of her fault that it all happened. So to rectify what she could for Link, she decides to send him back to his original timeline, removing the Hero of Time from the adult timeline and permanently splitting the timeline into adult and child. And this is where a multitude of theories take place, such as the rather controversial theory that the spirit of the hero itself was removed from the adult timeline because of this, leading to no hero rising when the world needed him again when Ganon broke out of his seal prior to the events of the Wind Waker. Or my theory that the Master Sword was removed from the adult timeline because of this, leading to another blade taking its place also in the Wind Waker. Anyway, we've spent a lot of time discussing Ocarina of Zelda, but the last thing I'll mention is that she has 2 existences by the end of the game. The grown-up Ocarina Zelda we see at the end that lives on in the adult timeline and probably helps restore Hyrule, and the kid Ocarina Zelda we see at the end that lives on in the child timeline and gives Link the Ocarina of Time once again before he goes on his next adventure in Termina. Moving on, we'll cover the adult timeline Zeldas first, since I mentioned Wind Waker so much. Princess Zelda in the Wind Waker actually has no idea she's a princess until you're a good ways into the game. And before that, she's a young 12-year-old pirate queen who went by the name Tetra and inherited a ship and its crew once her mother, the previous pirate queen, passed away. Tetra, as far as we can tell, was born at sea, but is obviously a descendant of Ocarina Zelda, and because of this, we can actually see a giant picture of an ancestor of her lineage down in the submerged Hyrule Castle. A previous Zelda who also had a crew, I guess, positioned around her, which mimics the current pirate crew exactly, implying that Tetra and her crew are all descendants of these ancestors. Along with her bloodline, she also carried with her a fragment of the Triforce of Wisdom, which had been passed down from mother to daughter following the fall of Hyrule and the flooding of the world. As per the events of the game, eventually Tetra, now wearing a dress and going by the name Zelda, helps Link defeat Ganondorf and the world of Hyrule is drowned once and for all. And then Zelda takes off her dress and goes back to going by the name Tetra and sails off with Link for more adventures at sea. She does make a slight appearance in the game's direct sequel, The Phantom Hourglass, where she is pretty much immediately captured until the end of the game, at which point she returns to the pirate's life. However, the next Zelda in the adult timeline is a descendant of Tetra Zelda, who discovered a new land with Link and founded New Hyrule and the new royal family before passing away. Spirit Tracks Zelda is specifically Tetra's great-great-granddaughter and shares a backstory with the Four Swords Zelda in that she's been a childhood friend of Link and pulls an Ocarina Zelda by secretly meeting with Link and plotting to investigate matters without involving any adults. In this case, they begin investigating the disappearance of the Spirit Tracks. Also, she is actually the first playable Zelda in the franchise, which is a huge milestone for the series. What's that? You say you remember another playable Zelda before Spirit Tracks Zelda? No, you don't. That was just a bad dream. Anyway, Spirit Tracks Zelda also serves as the game's companion character after she's, killed, actually. Well, not killed per se, but her soul leaves her body, so you tell me what that means. Anyway, bada bing, bada boom, she and Link kick all sorts of booty, and eventually Link exorcises Princess Zelda's possessed body and she's able to regain it. After which they kick the new Demon King Malladus's booty and restore order to the land of New Hyrule together. And now the adult timeline has a happily ever after ending. Moving over to the child timeline, the first Zelda to appear in a game after Ocarina Zelda does in Majora's Mask would be Twilight Zelda from the game Twilight Princess. Now, in the child timeline, Ganondorf's takeover of Hyrule was prevented due to Link going back in time and well, preventing it. However, the Triforce was still split into 3 pieces somehow, which means that it may exist outside of the timelines, but that is not a subject I'm willing to get into right now. I said that because in Twilight Princess, the descendants of the Hero of Time and Ocarina of Zelda both already have their pieces of the Triforce in their bloodlines, which is really neither here nor there, but I just wanted to cover it real quick. Anyway, Twilight Zelda, by the time the game takes place, is the sole ruler of Hyrule, which is proven by the fact that when Zant barges into the throne room to take it over, it's Zelda herself that he approaches and not a king or anybody else, which should mean that technically she should be Queen Zelda, so I'm just gonna call her Queen Zelda from now on. Anyway, Zant forces Queen Zelda to surrender and thus plunges the world of Hyrule into twilight, with Zelda being held prisoner in her own castle, which I guess could be worse, all things considered. I mean, at least she has a view of the kingdom that she surrendered, whose inhabitants are now eternally suffering. Anyway, eventually Link and the real Twilight Princess named Midna approach Zelda while Midna is dying after Zant forcefully plunges her into the light. As a being of twilight, her life begins to fade very quickly, but just before she takes her last breath, Queen Zelda decides to sacrifice her essence in order to save Midna's life, transforming Midna from being just a being of twilight into a being of both light and twilight. Now, I'd like to interject a little mini theory of mine regarding how Zelda was able to do this and dissipate entirely, but yet also have her soulless body show up later in order to be possessed by Ganondorf. I mean, if this was Zelda's body that just disappeared into thin air, what, did Ganondorf just conjure up a new body in Zelda's image just because he wanted to possess a Zelda? I think not personally. I think the answer is tied to why she's strangely able to resist turning into a spirit like all the other Hyruleans do when exposed to twilight. Simply put, I think she actually is a spirit here. Similar to the other spirits, but not quite. See, I think that perhaps she was granted some special protections from her piece of the Triforce when subjected to the influence of twilight, just like Link when he was turned into a wolf instead of a spirit. And if you think about it, we already know that the Triforce pieces protect their bearers from twilight, but act differently when exposed to twilight. The Triforce of Courage turns its bearer into a courageous beast, while the Triforce of Power turns its bearer into literally a flaming ball of power. So what if the Triforce of Wisdom allows its bearer to manifest their spirit or their mind's essence from within their body in order to still be interacted with other beings of light or twilight? What I'm saying is, what if Queen Zelda's body never left the throne room and we're actually speaking to her Triforce-enabled spirit in the castle tower? Or maybe it's a holographic double of her body, which is something that the Sheikah have been known to do, which is why she's wearing a Sheikah cloak. But, you know, regardless, after defeating her Ganondorf-possessed body, Zelda's essence leaves Midna and returns to her own body, after which she aids Link in 25% of the battle against Ganondorf by shooting him with light arrows on horseback. Once he's finally dead and gone after the climactic 4-part battle, Zelda is seen saying goodbye to Midna at the Mirror of Twilight forever, and afterwards presumably returns to her rightful place at the throne of Hyrule. Later on in the timeline, Four Swords Adventures takes place, which features the next Zelda. Once again, it can be assumed that she was childhood friends with Link like the Zelda from Four Swords, but like the Zelda from A Link to the Past, which we haven't gotten to just yet, she is able to telepathically communicate with Link and asks him to join her at the Four Swords Sanctuary in order to check up on what's going on with all the ominous clouds of darkness covering the land. Turns out it was a trap by Shadow Link, and Vati once again is released upon Link drawing the Four Sword. Vati once again kidnaps a Zelda for the 3rd time now, and Zelda, after being rescued by Link, aids Link in defeating Ganon. The end. Moving over to the Fallen Timeline, or as we should call it, the alternate reality in which Link dies at the end of Ocarina of Time, the first Zelda that appears after Ocarina Zelda would be the Princess Zelda of A Link to the Past. This Zelda starts off the game by telepathically communicating with the members of the Knights of Hyrule, which in this case means Link and his uncle. She asks for help because she's been kidnapped by the wizard Aghanim, who was trying to sacrifice all of the descendants of the 7 wise men to undo their seal on Ganon in the Dark World, which he was imprisoned within after he offed Link. Anyway, Link is not able to salve Zelda and she gets sacrificed, straight up, which in this universe means that she gets sent to the Dark World, trapped on top of Death Mountain. She doesn't do too much after this point because, well, she can't, and eventually Link frees her and wishes upon the Triforce for evil to be dispelled from the land, after which Zelda is able to return to Hyrule. This Zelda is the same Zelda that is referenced in the Oracle games and even kidnapped once again, go figure if the games are linked. Twin Rova, who apparently was not killed in the Fallen Timeline, is the one who kidnaps Zelda at this point and attempts to sacrifice her in order to resurrect their son, Ganondorf. Link prevents this, but they end up just sacrificing themselves in order to resurrect a mindless version of Ganondorf, Ganon, who is beaten by Link, and once again Zelda is able to return to Hyrule unscathed, but probably traumatized. The next Zelda that pops up is the Zelda from A Link Between Worlds, who, like Twilight Zelda, rules over her land alone, without a father or a mother or a suitor. When she first first meets Link, she is warned about Yuga running around turning people into paintings and being generally obnoxious, at which point she tells Link to go warn Sahasrahla and gives him the Pendant of Courage, which is one of the 3 pendants of virtue necessary for drawing the Master Sword from deep within the Lost Woods in this game and in A Link to the Past. She did this because she had a feeling that they just might need a hero, and boy was she right, because not too long afterwards, Yuga comes for Zelda herself and ends up kidnapping her by turning her into a beautiful painting and yanks her into Lorule, with Link following behind. And similarly to Aghanim from A Link to the Past, Yuga uses Zelda and the rest of the sages to revive Ganon, and then merge with Ganon, forming Yuga Ganon, who eventually will be defeated by Link. Zelda and Hyrule are saved at this point, but before I move on to the next Zelda in the timeline, I'm going to cover the other Zelda in this very game. And by that, I mean Lorule's version of Zelda, the Princess Hilda, who has a lot to do with the story because she's actually the one behind Yuga's actions. Honestly, I'm still very impressed with this game for pulling one over on us like that. Yuga was actually Hilda's court mage, but I'll get to that in a second. See, she's nice for the majority of the game and quote-unquote stops Yuga Ganon from killing Link after Link arrives in Lorule, and even serves to telepathically guide Link as he journeys across both lands. And it isn't until the end of the game that we finally get Upside Down Zelda's backstory. Hilda's version of Hyrule, called Lorule, used to have its own Triforce, which similarly to Hyrule's Triforce was also brutally fought over by the Lorulean inhabitants. Differing from Hyrule, however, Hilda's ancestors decided to use the Triforce to destroy the Triforce, which is the kind of big brain move that would make Thanos proud, but mistake! Lorule can't actually survive without a Triforce. It was never designed to. So Hilda instead searched for another Triforce, and she found one. Our Triforce. Hyrule's Triforce. So at the end of the game, she reveals that our Triforce is what she and Yuga were after all along. And she then steals Zelda's Triforce of Wisdom and summons Yuga Ganon once again, who has Ganon's Triforce of Power somehow, and commands Yuga Ganon to straight up kill Link in order to gain the Triforce of Courage, which is unsuccessful because she forgot Link's kind of a badass. Hilda then asks Yuga Ganon to give her his piece, but Yuga Ganon says, okay, I hear you, but what if you gave me yours? And then he takes her piece in an act of brutal betrayal and then turns Hilda into a painting herself and absorbs her. After Link defeats him yet again, both Triforce pieces and Hilda are released from Yuga Ganon's gut. Hilda then actually starts to try to attack Link, but is stopped by Upside Down Link, also known as Ravio, the cowardly rabbit dude. After talking with Ravio, she finally sees the error in her ways and sends Link and Zelda back to Hyrule, who in return wish upon Hyrule's Triforce to restore Lorule's Triforce, which is the Zelda universe equivalent of wishing for more wishes. But the point is, it works, and both this Zelda and this Hilda live happily ever after, as far as we can tell. The third to last Zelda in the series pops up in the next game in the Fallen Timeline, the original Legend of Zelda. She's got a bit of a simple story in that she breaks her Triforce of Wisdom into 8 pieces and scatters them across the land in order to hide them from Ganon, who has been resurrected by his followers prior to the events of the game. Yeah, that keeps happening. Someone should do something about that. She sends her handmaiden Impa out to look for a hero. Impa finds a 10-year-old with a sword and goes, hey, you know what? That could work, and thus enlists the child known as Link in the service of saving the world. Ganon reaches Zelda in the meantime and imprisons her underneath Death Mountain, where she waits until the end of the game when Link saves her, and in her gratitude she says, thanks, Link. You're the hero of Hyrule. Moving on, the next game and last game in the child timeline is The Adventure of Link, which takes place 6 years after the previous game and technically features the same Princess Zelda, although she never actually makes an appearance due to, you know, ruling Hyrule and all that. However, the entire point of Link's journey in this game is to find and awaken an ancient sleeping Princess Zelda, who is the next Zelda that I'll be talking about now. Sleeping Beauty Zelda was the Princess of Hyrule long ago, when it was ruled by her father, and following her father's death, her brother the prince. It is said that her father used the Triforce for good and made Hyrule all nice and peachy, but after he died, he decided for whatever reason to not tell his son where to find the entire Triforce, but told his daughter Zelda instead. I guess she was the favorite child. At this point, some random wizard, perhaps even another residual alter ego of Ganon, appears and tells the prince that his sister knows where the other pieces are, at which point both the prince and the wizard angrily question Zelda, but the stubborn Sleeping Beauty gives them nothing, likely out of fear that the Triforce's ultimate wishing power would be misused, which is a healthy fear. However, the wizard got upset and places Zelda into an eternal slumber and then dies after casting the spell. This was not at all what the prince wanted to happen because, after all, he loved his sister, and therefore this made him pretty upset. And it's because of this very story that he, being the new king of Hyrule, decreed that all daughters born into the royal lineage would therefore be named Zelda. Anyway, that being said, eventually Link saves her and wakes her up from her ancient sleep, and she says, "You saved Hyrule, and you are a real hero." Then they kiss, and you cannot convince me otherwise. The most notable thing about the existence of Sleeping Beauty Zelda, to me, is the fact that at this point in time, there are legitimately two Princess Zeldas alive at the same time. This one and the one from the previous game who's currently ruling Hyrule. The question is, following the adventure of Link, doesn't this mean that there are now two royal family lines? I mean, come on, did nobody at Nintendo really think this one through? Did they forget? Somehow I doubt we will ever get an answer to that. The final Princess Zelda in the series would be the one and only Zelda of the Wild from Breath of the Wild. Now, this Zelda is probably the most popular of all the Zeldas on account of her being from the most popular Zelda game of all time, and because of that, I'll just briefly touch on her story since most of you probably know all there is to know about her by now. In a shell of a nut, she was, as every Zelda before her besides Skyward Zelda, born a princess of Hyrule. But unlike her mother and presumably all the other females of the royal line, she was never able to unlock the powers of her bloodline. This caused her to try to find other ways to aid the land of Hyrule, and thus she partnered closely with her Sheikah friends and became somewhat of a scientist herself. She even went so far as to lead the 5 chosen Hyrulean champions who were each chosen to pilot a divine beast following the prophecy of Ganon's return and the discovery of the ancient Sheikah automations. However, she never stopped trying to unlock her powers. People like her father and the influence of the all too successful Link, who was the same age as her, didn't let her forget. If anything, it just added to her overall stress, poor thing. It wasn't until Calamity Ganon finally reared its ugly head on her 17th birthday of all days, and after everyone she knew had died except for Link, that her powers finally unlocked in order to save Link's life at the very last second. It's called love, people. Anyway, after that, she sends Link off to the Shrine of Resurrection, where it spends 100 freaking years rebuilding his body, and goes off to Hyrule Castle herself to contain Calamity Ganon until Link revives and is able to, you know, be a hero, telepathically communicating with him all the while. Link does indeed kick Calamity booty, and Zelda is able to seal it away using the last of her power. She did have a 100-year run with it though, so I'm sure she's good for now. Following the events of Breath of the Wild, apparently the Sheikah machines stop working, such as Vah Ruta, and presumably Link and Zelda set off to investigate, and we have now officially fully explained every Zelda and even alternate universe Zelda there is in the franchise. All the way until Zelda of the Wild's upcoming appearance in Tears of the Kingdom, of course. But the only thing we know about her in-game so far is that she's rocking a new haircut, and also she might be dead. I'm looking forward to finding out in just over 100 days though. If you're looking forward to finding out, and if you're still watching, then please consider pressing that like button because this video was a ton of work, and it would really help it get spread around on YouTube better. And if you're planning on picking up Tears of the Kingdom, make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already because there's gonna be coverage on the channel. Oh yeah, tons of coverage. Huge thanks as always to my Bandit crew for supporting my videos. I could not do this without you. And that's all I've got for this one. If you want to have all links explained, click the link in the description. Otherwise, follow me on my socials like Instagram, where I'm gonna be doing a giveaway real soon. And this is Bandit, looking forward to seeing you in the next one and signing out. Peace!